In 2015, one of the poorest countries in the Western Hemisphere discovered something beneath its ocean floor that should have made every single citizen a millionaire. It didn't. Instead, what happened next became one of the most sophisticated legal thefts in modern history, and almost nobody talked about it. This is the story of Guyana, and the contract that may have stolen its future before it even began. Guyana sits on the northeastern tip of South America, a small nation of less than 1 million people. No global influence, no military power, no seat at any table that mattered. For most of its history, Guyana survived on sugar, rice, and bauxite. Its people were hardworking and proud, but the country was poor. Roads were broken, schools were underfunded, hospitals were running on borrowed time. Nobody was watching Guyana. That was the problem. Because beneath the Atlantic Ocean, just off the Guyanese coastline, something had been sitting undisturbed for millions of years. Oil. Not a little oil. Not a moderate deposit. One of the largest offshore oil discoveries on the planet. More than 11 billion barrels of recoverable crude. Enough to transform Guyana into one of the wealthiest nations per capita in the entire world. But wealth, it turns out, is not just about what you have. It's about who controls it. Before a single barrel was confirmed, ExxonMobil was already in the room. The largest private oil company on Earth. Headquartered in Houston, Texas. With revenues larger than the entire GDP of most African and Caribbean nations combined. ExxonMobil didn't just arrive with money. They arrived with lawyers. Dozens of them. Years of preparation. Contract language crafted by the sharpest legal minds corporate America could hire. Guyana sent what it had. A small government team. Limited experience. And a nation desperate for development. The negotiation wasn't a negotiation. It was a transaction. In 1999, Guyana signed its first production sharing agreement with ExxonMobil for the Stabroek Block, a massive offshore territory. At the time, no oil had been confirmed. The deal seemed reasonable. Then in 2015, the discovery hit, and suddenly the terms of that agreement looked very different. Under the contract, ExxonMobil was allowed to recover 100% of its operating costs from oil revenues before Guyana received a single dollar in profit. Every dollar ExxonMobil spent, on rigs, on equipment, on salaries, on supplies, came straight off the top. First, before Guyana touched anything. This mechanism is called cost recovery, and in the hands of a corporation this large, it becomes something else entirely. It becomes a system where the books never quite balance in your favor. By 2020, Guyana had officially become an oil-producing nation. The rigs were running. The tankers were loading. Billions of dollars of crude were moving north across the Atlantic. And Guyana's share? 2% royalty on every barrel extracted from its own ocean floor. 2%. Meanwhile, comparable oil deals in other nations were paying host governments between 50 and 80% of profits. Let that settle for a moment. One of the richest oil discoveries of the century, in one of the poorest countries in the Western Hemisphere, and the nation sitting on top of it was receiving the kind of royalty rate you'd offer someone who had no other options. Because they had calculated, correctly, that Guyana had no other options. When economists and legal scholars began examining the Guyanese contract, what they found was staggering. The agreement had been structured so that ExxonMobil could claim costs on top of costs. Infrastructure, overhead, management fees, exploration expenses from years before oil was even confirmed. All of it recovered from Guyana's share first. One independent analysis estimated that under the original terms, Guyana could be producing oil for decades and still not reach its full profit share because the cost recovery ceiling was so generous to ExxonMobil that the corporation would always recoup more than it spent before the split began. The Guyanese people were working for free, and most of them didn't even know it. What makes this story different from other resource-cursed disasters is the silence around it. There was no war, no coup, no dramatic headline moment, just a contract, signed quietly, buried in legal language, enforced by the most powerful legal and financial apparatus on Earth. When Guyanese civil society groups began raising alarms, they were told the contract was confidential. When journalists requested access to the agreement, they were blocked. When international economists called the terms exploitative, ExxonMobil's response was consistent. The deal was legal. The deal was signed. The deal stands. And behind ExxonMobil stood something larger. United States diplomatic and economic interests in the region, the IMF, the World Bank, institutions whose frameworks had long conditioned developing nations to accept the terms that powerful corporations offered, or risk losing investment entirely. The choice Guyana faced wasn't really a choice. But Guyana did not go quietly. A new generation of Guyanese economists, lawyers, and activists began building a case. They went through the contract line by line. They published findings. They pressured the government. They demanded renegotiation. And in the streets of Georgetown, something shifted. Citizens who had never read a contract in their lives began asking the same question. Why are we poor when we are sitting on billions? That question has brought down governments. It has started revolutions. And in Guyana, it has started something that is still unfolding right now. Because as of today, Guyana is still fighting ExxonMobil. The government has launched new negotiations. International legal pressure is mounting. Some contract terms have been reviewed. But the core of the original agreement, the cost recovery structure that funnels billions away from the Guyanese people, remains largely intact. ExxonMobil made more money from Guyana's oil in a single quarter than Guyana's entire national health budget for the year. A country with an 11 billion barrel oil field still has schools with broken desks, still has hospitals without consistent electricity, still has citizens who have never seen a single dollar from the largest natural resource discovery in their nation's history. This is what the resource curse actually looks like. Not a war, not a famine, just a contract, and the power to enforce it. Now here is what I need you to think about right now. Guyana is not alone. Nigeria has oil. Congo has cobalt. Bolivia has lithium. Ghana has gold. The story you just watched is playing out in dozens of countries, quietly, legally, with the full backing of international law and corporate power. And in almost every single case, the people sitting on top of the resource are the last ones to benefit from it. Ask yourself this: does your country have natural resources? Because if it does, your government signed contracts too. And most of those contracts were never meant for you to read. If this story woke something up in you, share it right now. Not tomorrow, right now. Because the people who need to see this are scrolling past it at this exact moment. And the algorithm will not show them this video unless you act. Share this to your story. Share it to someone who doesn't know. Drop a comment below and tell us. What country are you from? And do you think your government made deals your people were never supposed to find out about? Come find us on Facebook. Leave us a review. It takes 30 seconds, and it helps us reach thousands of people who have never heard these stories. And subscribe to our YouTube channel, because what's coming next goes even deeper. We are about to start naming names. Corrupt politicians, hidden government deals, documents that were buried so the public would never find them. If you are not subscribed, you will not see it. The algorithm will not send it to you. And by the time you come looking, it may already be too late. Follow now, because the next story is the one they really don't want you to see.